This is CHSR 97.9 FM here in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. This is Python's Paradise, your film and music show, and this is your host, Greg Gilbert, aka the Python Hyena. And folks, 2 years before I was born, 1970, came out an awesome movie, very creative movie called Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And I had the pleasure of having Harrison Page on here last year in January of 2017. And even more recently, I had the lovely and the beautiful Dolly Reed Martin, who was an absolute quote-unquote doll. Well, Dolly has put me in touch with one of her fellow dolls, Marcia McBroom. How do you do, Marcia?
Hi, how are you, Greg? It's so exciting to be out here again.
Yes, absolutely. Wow, I love this movie, and I'm so honored that Dolly had put me in touch with you, and here we are. This movie is, holy cow, it's been, like I said, 1970, and here we are, 2018. What do you think of that?
Well, as a grandmother of 3 children, I think that's miraculous. I went to a local pub up here in Albany, New York, and there was a young man who was only 39, and I don't know how the movie came up, but when he heard I was one of the dolls, he was like so excited, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And new generations and people still know about Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, but it was quite an extraordinary film, and it says a lot about that era when I look back on it, the lingo that we used and the clothing and all kinds of craziness that went on in the film. So it's quite interesting. As a matter of fact, it's even more beloved now than when it originally came out, because when it was actually aired for the first time, people just didn't know what to expect, and they didn't know it was a spoof. And so they were sitting there cringing in the theaters. But now people can appreciate what it was all about and the satire and everything else.
Yeah, and look at the references today. It was no more than 4 years after the film came out. It was even referenced in Phantom of the Paradise. But even more so, it was a major reference in Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery.
Yeah, and we're also going to be featured. I don't know the name of it yet, but there's a group that's doing a documentary on the top 30 cult films, and Dolly and I were interviewed for that as well.
Oh, wow. I never heard about this.
Yeah, because it's, they're still in production, but the fact that we made it for the top 30 cult films of all time, that's going to be exciting when that comes out.
Oh, wow. What can you give me for details? I might try to get somebody on for that. That sounds like it'd be right up my alley.
Right. Yes, I'll get the details to you.
Absolutely. Sure. Wow. A documentary on the top 30 cult films. And
and it's funny because they included the father of my daughter-in-law, Apache Ramos, because he was also in another cult film called The Warriors.
Yes.
And that took place in Brooklyn, New York, and that's still so popular that they even had Coney Island last summer, and they were on the cover of the Village Voice newspaper and on television. So we always laugh with our grandchildren because we said, how many grandchildren have 2 grandparents who were film stars?
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, cult films is interesting, because I hear so many people talk about, well, it's what's made money at the box office that matters. Well, that's not always the case, because I remember, and I've told this story to a lot of my guests before, in 1998, one of the highest grossing films was Armageddon, but I thought the movie was horrible. But it's interesting, a film that wasn't so huge that same year is now a major cult film called The Big Lebowski. Yep. I'll be surprised if that doesn't make that film.
Well, you know what? A lot of people are not aware of. Roger Ebert, who is a famous film critic,
Yep.
wrote Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and what they explained to us was they were using all the corny lines and situations that one can imagine in film and putting it in this film. So some of the things that seem so outrageous and so ridiculous, they did that on purpose to show you just just the whole insanity of films. For example, when our manager in the film tries to commit suicide but doesn't die and he becomes a paraplegic, and then they say that in some rare cases, that he can recover, and of course at the end when he's really needed he does recover, and it's kind of, oh, what kind of humor do you call it? Kind of dark humor, but it's just so hysterical. So many things. And sometimes, though, on set, we would actually argue with Russ on the set because it was like, oh, no, this is just too ridiculous. We can't say it this way. But Russ was very wonderful working with all of us, so he'd let us change some of the dialogue so that we'd feel more comfortable with it, because some of the things were just so ridiculous. We said, oh, no, I can't do this. So he'd say, well, what do you want to say? So then we would change it on set. So that was fun. And then towards the end, I reconnected with Roger Ebert, and we were emailing each other up till the end.
Mm-hmm.
And he even invited my husband and me out to Illinois, and he gave me a thumbs up award for Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. So that was very, very sweet of him. So I have that award. It was done by the same people who do the Oscars, and so it's a nice little heavy award with the thumbs up. It's really sweet.
Yes. Before we dive into Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, I'm just wondering, for the listeners, we get a little bit of your background.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm born and raised in New York City,
Mm-hmm.
and I was one of the pioneer dark-skinned models of the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the days where African-American models had to be very light-skinned to get any work. So I was one of the pioneers to push for darker-skinned women to get jobs. So I did several album covers, book covers, a lot of TV commercials, and then I was also a dancer. I danced with Katherine Dunham, who was a famous African-American choreographer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got a chance to dance in Aida at the Metropolitan Opera House for 5 seasons because Miss Dunham did the choreography at that time for Aida. And then she took me to Paris to dance in a musical comedy for 6 months called Deux Anges sont venus. So the little French that I speak, I learned while I was in Paris living for 6 months. And then, let me see what else. Then, of course, through my modeling agency, actually, I started getting interviews to go and do movies. And also I was with an agency called Agency for the Performing Arts. They're the agency that hooked me up with Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. But then after that, I did Jesus Christ Superstar in Israel with Norman Jewison.
Mm-hmm.
And then I did smaller roles in some other, they call them blaxploitation films. So
Yeah.
I was in a film called Come Back Charleston Blue. Then Bingo Long and the Traveling All-Stars with Billy D. Williams. I played his girlfriend in that movie. But unfortunately, our best scene together, which was the two of us walking down a street talking, that ended up on the cutting room floor because the film was really about the African-American baseball team. And it was so interesting because the director even apologized to me when I came for the screening to say, oh, my God, that beautiful scene, we had to cut it because of the length of the film, and it was amazing. But it was such a beautiful scene that even the crew applauded after we finished, which is very rare when you're working on a set.
Mm-hmm.
And I did Legend of Nigger Charlie with Fred Williamson, who was a famous football player at the time. They called him the Hammer.
Okay.
did that one with him. So it was just very interesting. And there were other roles that I just turned down because I just felt they were just too derogatory in terms of African American women. And so there were things that I wouldn't even, consider. But I did love the things that I did. And sometimes it was cute because I was an extra on Cotton Comes to Harlem with, what's his name, Red Fox.
Okay.
And also two actors, let me see, Godfrey Cambridge, and I have the other one escapes me for the moment. Oh, Raymond Saint Jacques.
Okay.
And so I was just an extra in that film. But what was so interesting is Sam Goldwyn Jr. said, "Oh, we're going to do a sequel, but I'd like you to be a bad girl in the sequel," because he said I had the tendency of being typecast as Miss Goody Two Shoes.
Yeah.
So in Come Back Charleston Blue, I play a bad girl, and I even have this little karate fight and everything. But it was so much fun. It was so much fun working up in Harlem, and the cast was just really wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, and then I was in another film called Willie Dynamite, and there I was a hooker, part of what do they call that? When they have a group of women with their little pimp. But
Oh, I don't.
what do
Yeah.
they call that when you're like in the group? But anyway,
Yeah.
that was fun. That was also very interesting working on that set. So it's been very eclectic. For example, when we did Jesus Christ Superstar, we actually filmed it in Israel for 4.5 months.
Mm-hmm.
And they just did a remaster of the film, and Norm came in from Canada. He's up living in Canada now.
Mm-hmm.
Came for that viewing. It was so exciting seeing him after all these decades. So he told me, he said, "Oh, Marcia McBroom." It was so nice. It was really beautiful.
Absolutely. Well,
And something that a lot of people don't realize is when you're doing a film, you could imagine how intense it is because we had to be in makeup, let's say, at 7 in the morning, and you're with everybody all day long and for a number of weeks. So that's why you hear a lot of stories about people falling in love during doing a film and all kinds of stories because it is such an intense experience. It really, really is very, very special. And I do miss it. I must say, I do miss it because it's something that's very personal. For example, a lot of people have misconceptions because there are lines that have to be learned for the next day's shooting. So basically, one's life is coming home, getting those lines down, getting to bed as early as possible to get up at the crack of dawn to be bright-eyed and cheery for the filming. And because a film isn't done in sequence, so it could be any part of the film being shot that day.
mm-hmm.
So it's a whole different experience than performing on stage as an actor, because I've also done stage work. For example, one of my biggest jokes I always tell people, let's say there's going to be a film where you have to cry. And
Mm-hmm.
so you're getting your emotion memory all geared up, ready for the big crying and everything else. And just when you're ready to do it, lunch break, cut, come back in an hour. And it's like, oh, my God, all this preparation, all this work, boom, out the window, see you in an hour.
Yeah. Well, when you did Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, of course, you worked with director Russ Myers, who, of course, prior to that, of course, did Vixen. He did Faster Pussycat Kill, and had quite the reputation. Any memories of him on the set of that movie? I know you mentioned a few things, but anything stand out?
Oh, yes. For example, for me, and it's funny, as we speak, I could see he had these very large hands,
Mm-hmm.
and he had always this kind of little devilish smile that he had. But he was like a big teddy bear. And he was always so approachable, and because he worked with beautiful women, with the whole, sexual thing, he was always very reassuring and very comfortable, because he wanted us to feel very comfortable about ourselves, and so he really worked on a very personal level with each of us. And the one big joke we had together, because he always was known for having women with big breasts in his films, and I do not have large breasts. So he said, "You have the smallest breasts of any woman I've ever worked with, so let that be known that I did not pick you for your breasts." And I thought that was so cute. He was always so funny.
Yep. Well, and of course, Roger Ebert wrote the screenplay. Very interesting. He went on, of course, was a major film critic, and
Mhm.
yes, and of course,
But you see, that was the joke of the film, that because he was a major film critic, he thought it would be funny to do a film that had all the cliches that one could ever think of in a film.
Oh wow,
You see, and all the corny lines and all of that, that was his whole thing of a spoof on films. And that's what I feel a lot of people didn't realize, because some people have criticized, "Oh, I can't believe it. He was a film critic and he'd write something like that." But no, that's why he did it. And unfortunately, though, it was also a takeoff of the Sharon Tate murders.
yeah,
But it was also a thing about, for example, Phil Spector. So this whole film, in a way, it's kind of bizarre, because for some people, their real lives ended up as they did in the film, which is kind of horrifying. So, for example, poor Cynthia Myers, who was our other doll, she's now deceased.
mm-hmm.
May God rest her soul. But people became addicted. People became alcoholic. Do you see what I mean? So it was
Yep.
like kind of terrifying. So I said, well, thank God. For example, and for my character, I just get wounded in the film. And, that's another thing about Russ. He had a very keen insight on the hypocritical morality of our country.
Yep.
So, for example, they did a whole play on, let's say, the prudish, middle-aged or older man, but really having the hots for some little teenage girl. So they did a whole thing on that. And they said because I transgressed a little bit in the film, that's why I just got wounded. But people who went over the line with their sexuality or whatever, they had to die. And so that was part of it too, which is very interesting.
Wow. Well, the thing
Mm-hmm.
is, though, that completely got lost because, I mean, Dolly's character certainly um, expanded sexually, and went with other people, and
Yeah, but
she
she
didn't get.
didn't cross the line. For example, Cynthia went across the line in a lesbian
Oh, okay,
relationship.
I get what
You
you're
see what I'm
saying.
saying? So
Oh,
she
yeah.
had to die before the film was over. It was like that.
Well,
Or
who?
Michael Blodgett, who you went over the line as far as they felt the what do you call it, puritanical morality of the country. So he had to go.
Oh,
That kind of thing.
well, I say, who wouldn't want to kiss Cynthia Myers,
Of course,
or
of course.
Dolly Reed for that matter?
Oh, of course. But you see, they were playing on all of that in terms of the sense of morality. Certain people have to go. Like a lot of people are not aware that there was an unwritten Hollywood code, for example, if you look at any of the older films.
Yeah.
If anybody had a love relationship with someone, for example, from a different ethnic group, one or both of them had to die before the film was over. And that was because, this is a taboo, so they have to go.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the general public is totally unaware of these things.
I
As a
certainly
matter of
was.
fact, we always laugh when we see certain films and there's one African American, let's say a horror film. We know that person's going to be one of the first to get killed in the film.
Yeah.
They have a
Yeah.
short contract.
Yeah, well, I am aware of that, yep. The fact that they've now had spoofs, like in the Scary Movie franchise and whatnot, where,
Mhm.
the black guy has go die first, and
Exactly. But
yeah.
it's almost like a sick joke. As soon as we see him, we say, "Oh well, his days in the commissary will be limited."
Well, s you did get to work, of course, with a guy I interviewed, Harrison Page. Had a wonderful chat with him, and boy, I tell you, you really pushed him to the limits in the film.
Well, it's funny because I'm just hearing of this now, but it was really fun working with him. But another thing that people may not realize if you look at the film again,
Mhm.
Russ got off on the idea of people having quote unquote sex in very unpleasant, uncomfortable places. So there's even the scene with our manager, David Gurion, where he's complaining and saying, "Damn it, can't we ever have sex in bed for a change? It's in the back of the car, it's on the beach." And people don't realize, for example, sand is very rough and not comfortable at all, or us having an encounter in the hay and you're being stuck with needles in your body and you're supposed to be all romantic and everything. Meanwhile, it's very painful. So that was part of the joke, too, with Russ doing these things.
Well, poor Harrison, I was talking to him about the fact is he keeps coming back for you, and I think he gets beat up like twice in the film. And he was saying to me the scene where the boxer is
Right, who was like a Muhammad Ali type.
telling him to move out of the way. And Harrison said it bothered him because he said he does not think that character in reality would stand there and take that, would stand there in front of the car like that.
Yeah, but when you think about it, how progressive this film was in 1970.
Hmm.
Not only were we a girls rock band, but we were an integrated girls rock band.
Hmm.
And Harrison was studying to be a lawyer, so it was very upclass, middle class going on there. And people forget what was going on in 1970. The idea of an integrated female rock band was to me very, very progressive when I look back on it.
Well, Harrison had some wonderful things to say about you, and I just find it's funny, he loved you so much he kept going back. But I'm sitting there thinking a lot of guys probably would have given up after a while. But I love that shot of I can't remember the actor who played the boxer.
No, I don't remember his name either.
But I love that shot of him driving the car towards the camera, and it's just shaking, and he's going to the sides and whatnot.
Hmm.
And, very humorous despite the tragedy of what's
Yeah,
going on.
exactly. See, that was always the play that they had going, where something could be extremely tragic, but then there was a humor side to it as well, a humorous side as well. So that's why I feel that people looking at the film today can pick up a lot more in terms of the nuances than they did in 1970 when it first came out. And I think that's what keeps it still front and center with young people today, because it took a lot of chances and it went over the edge, over the top, and even all of the sexuality was like, oh my God, so in your face. People just weren't ready for all that. It was like, oh my goodness. And like the lines at the party scene, that was like a famous scene where they had all these little vignettes going on at the party.
Yep.
That was so unbelievable. It was really funny. And actually, people have always asked me this. I actually had to take drum lessons so I could do my part as a drummer.
Okay.
So it was a very low-budget film. Most of it was shot right on the lot at 20th Century Fox. And I heard at the time that the film came out, it really brought them out of the hole financially, although we as the actors unfortunately didn't get any of that because we didn't get any residuals or anything. So all the other films that I've done, even though I had minor roles, I get residual checks for them. But Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, let's say in all these years it's been out there, I've got maybe $50 from the powers that be. So that's terrible, because if we could have gotten at least residuals over these years, because it's been all over the world, Japan, Germany, everywhere, we don't get anything of that, which is terrible.
Yes, it is. And I've heard that from various people I've interviewed too about residuals and the powers that be kind of taking advantage of
Yes, of young ingenues who are so excited to be, in Hollywood, on the set and all of that, taking advantage of us. This is our first time on on the big screen. Yeah, so that is the sad part about it.
Well, what was your memories on working with Harrison Page? He loved working with you. I'm going to assume you loved working with him.
Oh, of course, of
Yeah.
course. As I said, when you're working on a film, it's a real family scene. And so, for example, I was from New York, so I didn't really know how to drive yet. So Cynthia would come and pick me up every morning to drive me to work. But it's so funny because she was truly, truly a playmate in the true sense of the word. So here we are waiting for a red light. She'd start flirting with guys in the next car over, and then speed off when the light changed. And she would take me to Hollywood parties and show me the ropes of what was going on and all the intrigue of Hollywood and everything. I'm like, oh my God, Cynthia, I can't believe this. But she was a real hoot. She had such a personality, and a real vixen type, and made no bones about it. It was all about sexuality and being gorgeous, and that was funny. That was fun.
Yes, and of course, John Lazar, the Z-Man, Superwoman. He was the Rocky Horror sweet transvestite before a Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Right, and believe it or not, he wanted to be a Shakespearean actor. And I heard he's complained all these decades that Beyond the Valley of the Dolls ruined his career because everybody saw him as Z-Man, and, that's been his image for the rest of his life. And believe it or not, the last day of shooting, the makeup person actually gave me the breasts that they pull off of him as a gift. But it was so ridiculous because I can't believe I didn't think of asking for a poster of my own movie. So here it is, I've ended up having to purchase posters of the movie when I could have gotten one for free. But as I said, everything is like so razzle-dazzle, simple little things like that I didn't think of at the time.
Yeah, but you got Superwoman's breast,
Yeah, I have Superwoman's breast framed.
There you go.
But this is funny too, because for so many years, because after I left the film business and everything, I ended up getting a fellowship from James Madison Fellowship to get a master's degree, because I had my BA degree from Hunter College in anthropology, and then I got a James Madison Fellowship to get my master's. I went to NYU, and so I became a high school history teacher, and I just recently retired from that. So here it is, I was out of the circuit for all these decades, so I finally did an autograph show with Dolly in California a few years ago, and people were so excited that we were going to be there together, and they hadn't seen me for decades. One young man came with all kinds of memorabilia, even an album cover that I did called Disco Baby, and that had the famous tune called Do the Hustle. And I'm on the cover, and it used to say, "Take this disco baby home." And he had all of these things, posters of me, and I couldn't believe it. He said, I've been looking for you for decades. Could you please autograph my memorabilia? And I was like, wow, this is fascinating. And what was even more fascinating, I'm on the cover of a paperback book called The Black Woman.
Okay.
And it was a group of essays by African American women writers, edited by a woman named Toni Cade. And I went to the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C., and I was looking for my album covers because I was on 2 covers for the Stylistics, 2 covers for Van McCoy, who did Do the Hustle, and Lalo Schifrin, and all these different groups, the Fatback Band, all these groups, and I was looking through to see if I saw any of my album covers, and I didn't see one. Freddie Hubbard's Black Angel, and I was so disappointed. Then the next time I went to the museum, there was a room on the Black Panthers with Huey P. Newton sitting in the famous wicker chair, and then there was a box, and it said Black Feminism, and there was my little paperback book with me on the cover at the museum in Washington, D.C., and I screamed like, oh, my God. And the guard came running over, and everyone said, is that you? Is that you? So it was so funny. Everybody wanted to take a picture with me next to the paperback book at the museum. That was exciting.
Oh, there you go.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I love Dolly Reed Martin, and that red hair and those wide eyes,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know you're still in touch with her. She was lovely and put me in touch with you and talk
Well,
a little, huh?
it was also wonderful because her husband, he was also with Agency for the Performing Arts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew Dick Martin, her husband, and I knew Dan Rowan, Dick's partner, for Laugh-In. So
Okay.
that's how deep it is, that not only are Dolly and I good friends, but the fact that I also knew her husband and went out with him and Dan Rowan, that is what makes our friendship even more concrete and more, what shall I say,
Yeah.
sincere, and that they were married for 40 years. And
Well,
such a beautiful, because you always hear about the horrible things with Hollywood couples and
mm-hmm.
divorces and everything, but then when you have true love, people aren't interested in that because that's not exciting. You know,
No.
you know what I'm saying? It's
No.
just like my husband, Louis Small. He played piano for Richie Havens for 10 years, and
Mm-hmm.
for those who don't know, Richie Havens is the artist who opened Woodstock.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, so he was the first one to perform at Woodstock. And Richie died a few years ago, but he took my husband all over the world playing piano. And it was just very, very exciting. But I was also a friend of Richie's before I even met my husband. So it's interesting, the interconnectedness, because, for example, when I was doing Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, I was roommates with Pam Grier.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so people often ask Pam, oh, how did you end up in the party scene of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls? And she said, oh, because Marcia McBroom was my roommate, and she invited me to come to the set with her one day, and they ended up putting her in the party scene in the movie.
Yeah, she got a little kind of a comeback there when
Exactly.
Quentin
And she wrote her
Tarantino put her in.
memoir. She's written her memoir.
Yeah.
Yep.
Quentin put her in Jackie Brown, Quentin Tarantino,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's also nice for your listeners to know that I ended up I'm in the Hall of Fame of my alma mater, Hunter College.
Oh, wow.
And what was so wonderful is, as I said, I got my BA in cultural anthropology, and so we got a notice that is there anyone you could recommend for our Hall of Fame? So my husband said, oh, Marcia, you've done so many things over the years. Why don't we put together a dossier and present it to your alma mater? So he put together all kinds of things For example, I have an organization called For Our Children's Sake, and
Mm-hmm.
I had an apartheid awareness contest for high school students, and I took students to Zimbabwe before the fall of apartheid, and all kinds of things. I designed a breastfeeding poster to promote breastfeeding for mothers,
Mm-hmm.
and I donated my poster to UNICEF, and UNICEF sent the poster around the world, and all kinds of different things. I created the first um, um, first. This was interesting. I was on the community board of New York, Community Board 6 in New York City, and I created a committee dealing with human rights. And people are like, what do we need a human rights committee for in New York? I said, because human rights are for all humans, no matter where they live. And I programmed it on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights of the United Nations. So I'd take an article from the Human Rights Declaration and invite the community to come. So I had something on Asians and how they were being treated in New York and education and different issues, and it was just very, very exciting. So I got a letter from a politician, and they said, do you know this is the first human rights committee on any community board in the history of New York City? So I was like, oh, this is so exciting to just do something and then end up, oh, this is historic.
Yep.
So anyway, we didn't hear from my school for a long time, so we thought, oh, well, too bad. And then all of a sudden I got a letter from Hunter College, and I thought, oh, it's another request for money, for a donation. But thank God I opened the envelope, and they said, oh, we're pleased to let you know that you've been selected to become a Hall of Famer, and this was in 2014. And so my name is on the wall. So when my grandchildren get bigger, I can take them to my school and say, here's Nai on the wall. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
so it's been very exciting, very eclectic.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why one of the things that I loved being a high school teacher was I was able to, but also I must say as a high school teacher, I did not share with my students my career as a model, actress, dancer, because as you know, many young people, they want to be rappers and they think that showbiz is an easy way out when it's a very, very difficult life, very disciplined life.
Mm-hmm.
So I never really wanted to push that forward for them because I wanted them to really stick with their academics and feel that they could get ahead doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, it was like just gravy train that it all happened for me. But it was very difficult because you have to have nerves of steel because I don't think people understand how debilitating that could be to have doors slammed in your face. For example, there were so many times, like I was supposed to do a cover for Cosmopolitan, and I met Scavullo 3 times, and it seemed like a go, and then at the last minute, it was like, oh, we just don't feel America's ready yet to see a dark-skinned woman on the cover of this magazine. We're sorry. And I'm telling you, there were women that I knew who actually had nervous breakdowns. One of my girlfriends, for example, she was going to make it no matter what it took, and she was going to have plastic surgery to get more Caucasian features and this and that. And I was like, going to accept me as who I am and how I am, or that's it. I'm not going for any to please someone else.
Yeah.
This poor young lady went to California, ended up at some wild party, and the day after the party, they found her body floating in the pool.
Oh.
So she fell in the pool. No one heard her screaming for help or anything. And here it is when the staff is cleaning up the next day, they found her floating in the pool. So, you know, there's a lot of tragedy there. People like to think of the glitz and the glamour,
Yep.
but there's also a lot of hardship. As I said, some people who couldn't take it when they were rejected so many times, they ended up having nervous breakdowns or becoming addicted. So that's the dark side of the whole thing, as we see happening even today in today's world with some of the people in the business.
Well, yeah. Well, they like to, the media likes to present it as glit and glamour, but the people I'm interviewing from movies, they all live normal lives. But that's
Mhm.
not what Hollywood's interested in, you know?
Exactly.
Yep.
And one has to be very selective and very determined to keep it that way, because people would like to drag you into some other sordid situation that you might not be able to get out of, and or have horrible regrets. But I must say, there was one thing I said to myself, promise I made to myself. I said, I always want to look in the mirror and feel good about who I am.
Yeah.
and and also I was thinking for the future, because for example, Playboy magazine did a piece on Beyond the Valley of the Dolls,
Mm-hmm.
and I must say they had a photographer. I'll never forget him. His name was Pompeo Posar.
Mm-hmm.
He took one of the most gorgeous headshots of me that I've ever taken in my life. And he begged me 3 times, would I do a centerfold for Playboy? And I'm like, oh, no, 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 because I was involved with my church. I'm a Unitarian Universalist, and we're a very liberal church. But I was like, first of all, I didn't want the world seeing me in my birthday suit, because I felt, oh, God, guys will be all over me as if they weren't already.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, and then how are people really going to take me seriously? Because I was always involved in politics and what have you. And sure enough, here I am, the mother of 2 sons and a high school teacher. And with today, with the internet and everything, that's all I would have needed was my high school students to find a picture of me from the past in my. That would have been outrageous. And yet, with today's modern, fast kids, because I would tell that story sometimes in my classes, and they say, "What, Miss McBroom? You turned something like that down?" And I'm like, "You're damn right I did," because there are other things that are more important to me than showing my body to the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's fun. But
Yeah.
as I said, Pompeo Posar. Oh, and then I also wrote on my release. I said you could only use this photograph for this one article on our movie, because I didn't want them again and whatever might have happened to me in my to then say, oh, thanks to her exposure in Playboy, that's why she's doing this, this, and this. So I
Yeah.
said, no, you can only use this headshot this one time for this article about our movie, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Well, that was an interesting movie, and so many interesting players in that movie. I think we touched upon Michael Blanchett, who played Lance, who ended up in a pretty nasty predicament by the film's end.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's also sad that many people, including Michael, are no longer with us.
Yeah, Michael's gone. Symphony
Myers is
is
gone.
gone. Yep.
The young lady who walked through the party scene painted black, she's gone. The hostess of the party, she's gone. So, and obviously Russ and Roger gone. And
Yep.
you know what's so interesting about Roger, I must say, even though and I didn't even know it was possible to get cancer of the salivary glands, but
Mm-hmm.
he was always very upbeat. Even though he couldn't speak anymore, he had to write everything down. And he was on some talk show I heard, and the host basically said, um, did how did you feel? Didn't you feel horrible that this happened to you? And he said, yeah, but um, the same way it could happen to me, I wouldn't want it to happen to anybody else. And so you have to just live your life day by day
Mm-hmm.
and be grateful for each day that you have. And that's
Absolutely.
a message I think everybody should be aware of, because we take too many things for granted. And as they say, there but for the grace of God go I. So I think a big message is no matter what, be humble, do what you can for others, because I feel a lot of people get too involved with me, 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 and then they feel shallow fine because of what's it all about. Extends
Yep.
oneself to others, then that gives one's personal life more meaning and more direction. And that's one thing I must say as a teacher. I can't tell you how many times I've run into students on the street and they tell me what they're doing. But one that was the most touching of all, a young man ran up to me in Midtown Manhattan, and he had like a construction worker's vest on, and he's like, Miss McBroom, I don't know if you remember me, but I was one of your students, and I'm so glad to run into you because I want to thank you for believing in me. And he said, because you believed in me, you got me to believe in myself.
Oh,
And now
wow.
I'm in college, and I have this job to help you with my expenses for college. But he said, I would never have been here if it were not for you. And I just hugged him in the middle of the street. I know everybody was wondering what the hell's going on. And he said, oh, no, I'm dirty. I said, no, you're not dirty. You're a working man. And I said, you are the reason that we teach.
Yes.
Yeah. So it was so profound for me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I have other students who have become doctors, two who become gemologists, all different kinds of professions. It's just so beautiful. So it's like having my experience and my knowledge reaching out to others. That's why I started my organization, For Our Children's Sake,
Mm-hmm.
because my question is, how far are we willing to go for our children's sake? And if we could see all of the children as our children, how much better this world would be. That's why our country is in such an uproar about the refugee children who were snatched from their mother's arms at the border and sent all over the country. It's just an outrage.
Yeah, I made a donation to something like that too that was on Facebook. And
Mm-hmm.
I think one of my interviewees had passed it on to me, and I donated, and I noticed some of my interviewees has done as well. And
Yeah.
yet, it's tragic.
Yeah, and there's a PBS special I just heard on Frontline. They did a 3-part series about the children of Yemen who are in northern Yemen. They're dying at the number of 130 a day by starvation that is being promoted by the U.S. government with the Saudis. And this is just sick.
Yeah.
I can't believe it in the 21st century that these things are still going on. And in the Congo, there's so many things that people don't even hear about, don't know anything about, but somebody's making money somewhere and they don't care how many people die as a consequence. So it's interesting because we get caught up in the glitz and the glamour, but as I say, but for the grace of God, go any one of us, and we have to always remember those who are less fortunate. I have a project called 1,000 Boxes of Hope, where we mail out material aid to children in Malawi,
Mm-hmm.
Native Americans in South Dakota and Montana. I'm involved with another organization working in Haiti, one in Sierra Leone. And so I reach out as much as I can, but I work with other grassroots organizations where I personally know the people who started that organization, so I know that our monies are being wisely used. Because let's face it, most of us are on a tight budget, and we want to know that if we make a donation that it's really going to go for what it's intended to go for.
Yep.
Yeah, so I have
Mm-hmm.
children in Malawi who are AIDS orphans. Their parents have died because of complications of HIV/AIDS, and they're child-headed households. So here it is, because I'm able to send school fees, little girls who would be forced into child marriages are able to go to school and complete their education so that they can make something of their lives. So that's where my heart is and my head is now, to know that, and they call me Mama Marcia there, because many of them, their real mothers are no longer with them.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the Native American groups, for example, she wrote to me and said that 85% of the people, for example, in the Yankton Reservation in South Dakota are unemployed. And people have resorted to methamphetamines, and grandparents are raising grandchildren because the parents have died. And she said that these boxes of hope have given so much hope to the people on the reservation, because they know that they're not alone. There are people on the outside who care. And she said so many times people come by all the time to ask her, did another box of hope arrive? Did another box of hope? So I love that, of giving people a sense that we are community, a global community, and we have to look out for one another. And to even bring in, like, the people in my neighborhood, they all come and they contribute, and it makes them feel good, because it's like, wow, I thought I was down and out, but then when you hear about what other people are going through, you're like, oh, God, I should be more grateful for what I have.
Yep.
And see what I can do to extend a hand to others, you see. So that's one of the things that I like, to use celebrity in a way. And I know there are many artists who have more resources than I have, are doing wonderful. And if you notice, usually you don't hear that much publicity about them. But if they do something stupid and crazy, then that's all over the news.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about some of the people that have passed away from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. And there's I thought Duncan MacLeod as Porter Hall, very funny in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And I gotta say too, very underrated actor Charles Napier.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I found out by surprise that he had passed away, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
he was in so many movies like Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, The Blues Brothers, Silence of the Lambs, and he's always good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were your memories of Charles in the film?
Well, as I said, my concentration were really with Dolly and Cynthia.
Okay.
So we were mostly like the little trio together. But the other people, of course, we all interacted and we were all very cordial with each other. But in terms of beyond being on set together, we didn't really reach out that much to each other. And remember, too, we were just like teenagers, and those guys were like older than we were. So,
Yeah.
We kind of stuck to each other.
What about Edie Williams? You remember her?
Oh, God, yes. Well, Edie was wild. That's what I can say.
That's what Harrison said too.
Edie was fully out there. So when we heard that Russ married her after the film, we were not surprised. We were not surprised.
And Erica Gavin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did see Erica a few years ago. We did an autograph signing together out west.
Mm-hmm.
And I did see her. And I know she'd been going through some difficulties in terms of drugs and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, always very sweet, very nice. But as I said, some of the things in the movie are kind of scary when you see people after the movie, and it's kind of like your character takes over your persona.
Yeah.
So that's always scary. So that's why certain films I wouldn't even touch with a 10-foot pole. Even the guy, for example, who did that movie, one of those Batman movies, remember, that was so sinister, and then he ended up dying?
Oh, The Dark Knight.
Yes.
Yeah. Heath
When
Ledger.
I saw that movie, I said that character was so intense.
Mm-hmm.
His spirit can actually enter your body, and something horrible is going to happen to you. And sure enough, the poor man is dead.
Yeah. Well, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, I guess they have wonderful soundtrack to it. Oh my goodness. Do you have a favorite song in the movie? I personally like Find It.
Oh, yeah, Find It, and I like Look On Up at the bottom.
Oh, that's a good one too. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, when Roger had he called it the, what was it called? It was like the, his film festival that he had, that he invited me to, where he presented me with the award.
Mm-hmm.
He actually invited the Strawberry Alarm Clock there, so they performed at that festival, the Overlooked Film Festival, that's what it was called. And he had different films that he felt had been overlooked from different countries, and it was just absolutely wonderful. And then he even showed a film by a famous, well, now he's deceased, but he was called the grandfather of African film, and his name was Usman Semben. And they even showed one of his films at the festival. And then there was a panel discussion afterwards, and Roger didn't know that I spoke a little French, so I ended up on the panel with other people discussing Usman's film because I actually knew him because I was asked to do a week of cultural activities at the United Nations during their special session on Africa. So one of the things I did was I had Usman actually flown in from Senegal to be a part of that special week at the United Nations, and it was just absolutely exciting. So that was another thing with Roger. He loved it. Oh, another surprise about Marcia he didn't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was great.
What were your memories of the Strawberry Alarm Clock and dolls?
Well, at that time, remember, that was a group that people really loved, and they were really popular at that
Mm-hmm.
time. And for a while after the film festival, my husband and I were in contact with the drummer of the Strawberry Alarm Clock. His name is Randy. He lives out in California.
Yeah.
But then, you know how it is, over time, everybody's busy. We haven't been in touch with him in a while. But he was very sweet, very wonderful. And it was fun seeing people years later. That's another joke, you know, because it's like everybody's so young and spiffy then, but to see people decades later, and I say, as long as we're still vertical, you know, there's yet hope.
Yeah.
But Randy had become very much into health foods and very spiritual, and it was really fun reconnecting with him. But,
Absolutely.
oh, you know what else? This was the thing I wanted people to know. It was so funny.
Okay.
For years after I finished the movie, every time I would go to a club, drummers would actually get up and ask me if I'd like to sit in on a set. And I'd have to tell them, oh, no, it was just for the movie. I'm not a real drummer. But I thought that was cute and that was flattering. And then it turns out my oldest son, Jeremiah Hosea, he's a bass player. So I said, isn't this funny? I end up playing a drummer in a girls' rock trio, and then my son actually becomes a rock musician. Of course, he'd kill me because I don't only play rock, Mom. He plays blues and different genres of music. But the
Mm-hmm.
point is that my own son became a musician, and my husband is also a musician. And I used to tell people in those days, oh, I wouldn't wish a musician on an enemy, because I always felt, you know, they're around so many women and traveling, and it's like, oh, my God, the drama. But here it is now, my son and my husband are both musicians, so that's funny. And my mother, who's still alive, God bless her, 93 years old.
Oh, wow.
She was a concert pianist. So it was cute because when she was putting my sister and I to sleep for our little nap, she would be playing Chopin etudes. And here it was to hear this incredible music as little kids. It was like mind-blowing. So it's been a very interesting life because in my family, for example, Stokely Carmichael was one of my cousins, even though I had very little contact with him other than he invited us to his wedding with Miriam Makeba. And then my younger son, Gregory, got to meet him in Guinea because my mom, I took some students to Guinea, and my mother and my younger son and one of my students from my high school got to meet Stokely. They were the last ones to interview him before he died. And then there's a drummer named Max Roach. He was another cousin, and then another cousin named Connie Kay, who worked with a group called the Modern Jazz Quartet. He was another cousin of mine. So it's been a very interesting thing. My mom worked with Dr. King. He was a friend of X. So we were always around. Oh, she played Harry Belafonte,
Mm-hmm.
and they're still in touch with each other. So we were all in a swirl of different personalities growing up. So that's been kind of a very interesting life. I've been to over 30 some odd countries, both as a performer. My mom had a travel agency, and I used to go with groups as a tour leader to different African countries. Then I got invited as a teacher to Germany, Japan, China. So it's been quite, even Israel, because I got invited back to Israel as a chaperone for students through the New York City Department of Ed. And even now that I'm retired, I write Regents exam questions for the New York State Department of Education. And that's why we even had to postpone this interview, because I had a deadline to meet to submit 24 questions, and it was like busting my chops because I had a lot of research to do to get that assignment completed.
No problem. I was going to say, what do your children think about your work and Beyond the Valley of the Dolls and the
Well,
phenomenon it is?
it's funny because they find it fascinating
Mm-hmm.
that they're. As a matter of fact, this is so funny you should mention that,
Mm-hmm.
because my youngest son, of all things, his name is Gregory.
Yeah.
So he met they've become married now, his wife
Mm-hmm.
of 8 years. When he went to date her, he went to her apartment, and what did she have but a poster of Beyond the Valley of the Dolls on her wall? And he looked up and he said, "Oh, that's my mom." And she said, "No way." And he said, "Yes, that's my mother." So, so this is what I'm saying, how this trickled to the new generation, God only knows. But that was an immediate bond for them when she said, "No way."
Yeah.
Yeah, let me meet her. And it was so cute because the first time we met, she brought the picture with her for me to autograph for her. And then my other son, he has a band called Earth Driver, and we
Okay.
did a fundraiser for a group from Sierra Leone, the Nene Center, and this was a school started by a friend of mine for children who had been orphaned by their horrific war that they had,
Mm-hmm.
and so we did it in coordination with a theater in New York. So the theater showed Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and then my son's band performed, and so they've incorporated the whole genre of their mom, the drummer from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, with their lives. So that's been cute. That's been fun. And then you know what I like? That young people see that you can have intellect, you can have concern for the community, and you can be a wild entertainer too. You can incorporate all of it together.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you about some of your other films, like Jesus Christ Superstar, for example. Very,
Mhm.
very popular, and I come from the Christian faith, so I must admit I've never seen Jesus Christ Superstar. I'm certainly aware of it. I've seen some
Mhm.
clips, but I haven't seen it. I know it came out in 1973, I believe.
Yes, it did. And every holiday they show it. So every time there's that holiday, I say, "Oh, I know my little check will be in the mail."
I love the Passion of the Christ. I got to admit that was very, very well done. But imposing music to it, now that's a little something different, maybe a little daring, but
Yeah.
yeah, but
But you know what?
yeah,
Now that you mentioned Jesus Christ Superstar, I must tell you one thing that happened that was a mind blower.
okay,
On the day that they had the scene where they were crucifying Christ,
mm-hmm,
it was a beautiful sunny day, and they put up the other two crosses with the other two people who were being crucified.
yep,
The moment they went to raise the cross, Ted Neely, who played Jesus,
mm-hmm,
the sky blackened,
oh
blew
wow,
up that was so powerful that they had to stop filming because they couldn't control the cranes or anything. It started pouring rain. And those of us who believe said, oh my God, this is a sign, this is unbelievable. Those who didn't believe said, it was just a coincidence. If it happens again, then I'll believe. We said, the timing was too deep.
Yeah.
Now, Yvonne Elliman, who played Mary in the movie,
Hmm.
she said, do you know the exact same thing happened when they were filming King of Kings? That the moment they went to raise the cross with the actor playing Jesus, a storm blew up and they had to stop shooting for that day.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Then when we did the remastering, Norman Jewison mentioned that at the end of the film,
Okay.
there you see a shepherd with his sheep go across the screen. He said this was totally unscripted. No one knows where this man came from or where he went. He said they were just closing the filming of the movie, and all of a sudden it seemed like out of nowhere came the shepherd and his flock of sheep. And at first they were going to stop shooting because this wasn't scripted, and Norman said, no, 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 keep the cameras rolling.
Yeah, because it was perfectly in the element.
I know, but nobody knew that this just happened like that. And then
Yeah.
he said the man seemed to disappear the same way he appeared in the film.
What was it like working with Norman Jewison? I mean, we just lost him not too long ago, too.
He died?
I believe so. I
I hope not, because I just saw him like last year, and he seemed in perfect health to me.
oh gee, okay, I'm gonna check that
Yeah,
because
I hope he's still amongst
I
the
don't
living.
want to give any wrong
Oh yeah,
information
please
on.
don't. Please
Yeah.
don't. Because a friend of mine called, he was in tears because he looked me up in Wikipedia and it's Italy and it said that I had passed on. And so he called me in tears and I started speaking to him. At first he thought it was just a voicemail. And he said, "Oh,
Oh,
this
you
is
know
so
what? I stand corrected.
Oh, thank
Okay,
God.
he's 91 years old.
Okay.
Okay,
Sounds more like it.
where did I get that? I wonder. Of course,
I
with the
don't know.
media being what it is, you never know what's true anymore. But
No, I know. But
okay.
Norman was a complete doll to work with. As a matter of fact, he ended up bringing his little girl on set towards the end of the shooting, and she took a liking to me. She was about 12 at the time, and actually invited me to go to their home in London after the filming. And I said to her, "You can't just invite people to your house. You have to ask your parents." But Norman had to stay in Israel for post-production work. So she asked her parents if I could come and spend some time at their home, and her mom said sure, that was fine. So I ended up spending a week with his daughter and his wife at the time. And it was cute because when I was there, his wife, this is his ex-wife now, she introduced me to Alan Ladd's son. And it was just a wonderful, wonderful time. So that's how close, as I said, you can get. For example, one of the lighting guys, who is also, our crew was British and Israeli, and there was one of the lighting men, I just remember his first name was Martin, and for several years after the movie, I used to go and stay with his family in London when I'd go to visit London. So it was very wonderful, and I very much respected the English crew, their professionalism. They were really, really great. And as a matter of fact, I have a wonderful photograph of me with Gregory Peck.
Oh
Because,
wow.
because Gregory Peck was a friend of Norman's, and one time he came to the set to visit Norman, and he was always one of my idols in terms of an actor.
Yep.
And so I went over to speak to him, and he was so sweet and charming.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody took a picture of us, and I've been going through tons of materials and papers that I have that that have to be filed, and others need to be just thrown out. And that here it is. I came across this photograph with me and Gregory Peck, so that's one of my prized possessions.
Yes. And
Hmm.
of course, you mentioned Bingo Long Traveling All Star, where you get to work with
Billy
Billy
D.
D.
Williams.
Williams. Now, James Earl Jones and, of course, Richard Pryor were also in that as well.
Right. Well, James Earl Jones, I always called him an actor's actor because he is just so superb and so gracious again as an actor, so generous. Unfortunately, when I was there, I never got to meet Richard Pryor, although I know it ended up that he ended up dating Pam Grier, which I didn't even know till recently that they
Oh,
had been an item for a while.
I actually didn't know that either.
I know. I just heard, a few years ago when she wrote her memoir, she had a whole big thing about her relationship with him. So I was like, oh, yeah. But it's what one thing people don't know is one, Billy D. Williams' family is from a tiny island that's still a British colony, and it's called Montserrat.
Yeah.
And my family is also from Montserrat. So that was one connection that we had together. And then I have found out since then Billy D is also an artist. So my husband and I went, for example, to New Orleans. It was the year before Katrina hit. And we went to an African American museum in New Orleans, and they had a display of some of Billy D's paintings. So that was exciting to see another aspect of somebody.
Yes, he's of course known as playing Lando Calrissian in The
Star
Empire
Wars.
Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi.
Mhm.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
But see, that's what's so beautiful to know that people have many facets. That's what I like to think of.
Mm-hmm.
To think of ourselves as a finely cut gemstone, and that we have many facets, and that we should polish each and every one of them that we can, so we can shine forth and give hope to others and give some inspiration for others. Because many times people feel down in the dumps, or they feel that you have to reach a certain level of acceptability before you can really make a difference in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel just making a difference in the world, no matter what level you are on, that's all that counts. And even a simple thing like filling up my bird feeder and hearing my little feathered friends all happy in the morning when they see, oh, there's bird seed here, you know.
Yep.
I feel like I'm getting some blessings from the animal kingdom.
There you
You
go.
know, so that's what I always remind people. Live and let live, love and be loved. That's what it's all about. Because without that, there's nothing. There's nothing. And it's not about the money as much as it is about the commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that we don't need donations to do what we're
Yeah.
doing, but think in terms of the commitment that I'm doing something, whatever that something is, and on whatever level it is.
Okay. There's some other films you had listed I never heard of, and
Hmm.
so I haven't seen them. But for those that have Netflix or whatnot, I thought maybe I would just get your input. This one here, I have a hard time even saying the title, The Legend of Nigger Charlie.
Yeah, and I think they changed the name of it now since, because that word, the
Yeah,
N word, is so offensive.
yeah.
I think they did change the title a bit, but I don't remember what the new title is. But I guess people could look up Fred Williamson, and because he's done a lot of films since then in Italy. So if you look up Fred Williamson, that title, whatever it's now become, would show up. But that was a horrible situation because Fred, because he was a football player and he's Mr. Honcho Mancho, Mr. Handsome guy,
Mm-hmm.
he busted my chops on that set to the point that I'd come to my room after and just cry because
Oh,
because he was trying to come on to me that, oh, because I'm supposed to be his girlfriend in the movie, that meant I was supposed to give it up after the set. And I was like, oh, no, that's not what I'm hired for. And I felt really put upon by him to the point that he wouldn't speak to me. And the director even came up to him and said, what the hell's going on here? But when we had so to get back at him, this was funny, to
mm-hmm.
get back at him because we had this big passionate love scene in a barn. And so in between, first of all, I made sure it was a closed set because people love it when you have some kind of partial nudity on a set
Yeah.
that everybody wants to be there. So I said, no, this definitely has to be a closed set. And here we were in the South, and so it was hot. So in between takes, because I just had what do you call it, lamb's wool to protect me, because I said I surely didn't want Fred having any accidents on set here with me. So I
Yeah.
made sure I was well protected. So in between the takes, I would just have to put a towel between us to absorb the perspiration, and I know that was busting his chops, and I'm lying underneath him with a towel between us. But it was so funny, and everybody was saying, "Oh, but you guys look so passionate in your scene." And I said, "That's what acting is all about."
Yeah. Well, the title puts me in mind of I've had Ralph Bakshi on here a couple times and
hmm
talked about Fritz the Cat and heavy traffic and stuff like that. But we talked about an animation he did called Coonskin, and
Mm.
he had mentioned that that title bothered him because it was not his idea. That was
Mhm.
not what he wanted to call the movie, and I forget now who he said put that on there, but he he said he was not pleased with the title of the movie, and it's funny because back then people were so free to say the stuff like that, and now it's like you look back and you almost wonder why they don't change some of these titles.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I heard they did change the one on that film because it was just so outrageous.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
but you know, it's funny because one night my husband and I, this is several years ago, we were at a nightclub with Grace Jones, who I happen to be her son's godmother,
Yeah, I
and
like
who
Grace Jones. Yep.
yeah, and
Yep.
who was at the club but Tarantino.
Oh
And
yeah.
he was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe it! I'm here with two icons, one of the Carrie Nation, Grace Jones."
Yep.
And so my husband ended up taking a picture of the three of us together, but I haven't been able to get him to put it out on the internet. And I'm like pissed because I'm like, whatever we have to say about Tarantino, he is a name director, and I was very impressed that he knew I was a member of the Carrie Nation.
Oh, Quentin's one of the best filmmakers working right now, I think. And right now, I think you mentioned Sharon Tate earlier, and I think he's
Uh-huh.
making a movie about the whole Manson situation right now.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah.
How
Um.
gruesome is that?
Yep. But
Mhm.
yeah, he's done a lot of great stuff, and yeah. And of course, you've done Come Back, Charlton Blue. Now I don't
Yeah.
know this one. Tell me about that.
Okay, well, Come Back Charleston was a sequel to Cotton Comes to Harlem. And the
Okay.
joke about Cotton Comes to Harlem was that there was this huge stash of money that disappeared and nobody knew where it was, and it turned out it was being hidden in a bale of cotton. And the
Okay.
bale of cotton was owned by Red Fox, who was this little junk man in the community. So the whole joke is about the criminals trying to get the money back, and here it is, this innocent little junk man was the one who actually had the money in the bale of cotton. And the joke was, what was a bale of cotton doing in the middle of Harlem?
Okay.
But that was funny too, because Red Foxy is one of our stellar comedians of the day. And here I was at that time, I was attending Hunter College. So since I was just an extra on set, I had my school books under my table, studying in between my takes, and again, razzle dazzle, being on an actual movie set. Ozzie Davis was the director,
Mm-hmm.
but Sam Goldwyn Jr. was there on a regular basis working on the film too. And so Red Fox invited me to lunch one day, and I went to have lunch with him, and he was so fresh with me. The things he said, if I were Caucasian, you'd see me blush from here to here. But here I was, this young girl, and I'm trying to act so grown up with this older man making these little fresh comments to me. And I'm like, I don't believe it. But he was funny. He was hysterical. He really was. It was funny and working with him.
Yeah. And Willie Dynamite.
Willie Dynamite, believe it or not, one of the guy who plays the big pimp, his name was Roscoe Brown, and he
Okay.
ended up with a big role on Sesame Street of all things. So, but see, there's the joy of acting, that you go from being on Sesame Street, one of the characters, to being this big time pimp. And I heard that there was a documentary done on some of these blaxploitation films, and they had the scene of Willie walking and all of us walking behind him down a long corridor. So, again, even when I had a role as I'm supposed to be a hooker or something like that, I would never let them take advantage of me. Like there was this low-budget film I did once, and it was called New York Nights, but now they changed that name also. And they had the nerve. They wanted me to do this nude lesbian scene in a steam room. And I said, first of all, I'm not doing a nude shot for you guys. That's out of the question.
Mm-hmm.
And I was ready to walk away from the whole thing, and the director was behind the producer telling me, please don't walk away from the film. He'll take care of everything. So it turned out they ended up using a body double for me for this hot, steamy scene. And then it didn't even make it for the movie. So then I said, now wouldn't I feel like the last of the fools if I had reneged on my position and did this for them, and then it turns out it's not even in the movie after I felt I did something I didn't want to do. So that was a thing to always remind young people, don't make anybody force you to do what you don't feel is right for you. You see what I mean?
Yep,
And
absolutely.
so that's something, because sometimes people feel that, oh, God, I have to do this because I want to get ahead. And it may not mean anything, and you might end up hurting yourself and getting nowhere, and then feeling ashamed of yourself for what you did or allowed people to do to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. So once you say, it's not only the money, because I have to live with myself and I'm going to spend the money, so the money is gone, but the feelings of shame and whatever you had to go through, that's not going to go.
No.
Yeah, and the one thing I must say also is a lot of people talk about the Hollywood casting couch, and you hear now with the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
The only time I was ever approached on that level was when I went up for an audition for the movie Blackula, and the guy who was auditioning me, he made that proposition, if I wanted to be in the film, this is what I'd have to do. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess you won't have me in this film. And I just walked out.
It's interesting because just recently I heard from an actor I'd interviewed before come out, and he talked about the fact that you hear a lot about women on the whole casting couch thing. This was the first time I heard about a male being exploited, and this actor, I read his blog piece, and I could not believe what he had went through, and you hear a lot of it with women, but this is a male that.
Oh God,
yeah.
So it's really terrifying when you know what could happen to people, and especially if you're young and you don't know any better, or sometimes things happen so quickly. It's happened, and you're there. It's really terrible. It really, really is terrible.
It is.
Mm-hmm. That people are just taking advantage of the fact that they know you really want to be a success, and that they are in a position of power and that they could take advantage of you.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Now you did,
and can even badmouth you and blackball you for other things that you might want to do later, which is added insult to injury.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Bunch of bullies.
Yep. But you see, a lot of people are going down because of it. No pun intended. But a lot of people are having to pay the price now for their past misdeeds.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's a good thing.
You did a lot of your films in the 70s, but you got one credit here listed from 1984, Shaken Up.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one I was telling you, New York Nights.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's right. That's the name they changed it to.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. And see, now that was funny because at that time I was involved with German TV because my first husband was Jewish, and so they did a documentary on our wedding and at the Unitarian Universalist Church in New
Mm-hmm.
York. And so, for example, they put me in a video with George McRae, who did "Rock Me Baby,"
Okay, yeah.
and it was cute because my sister Lorelai, I had totally forgotten that I did that with George McRae. I was just kind of grooving as he's singing the song to me, "Baby, take me in your arms and rock me, baby." And Lorelai found it on YouTube and posted it, and so here I was involved with German TV, and one of the members of the production company called me all the way from Germany, and he was so disappointed because he said he ran to see the movie because here he knew it was a kind of, nightlife in New York, and but in the film I wouldn't let them again show me naked. You just saw my clothes drop to the floor when I was supposed to get in bed with this
Yep.
guy. So here he calls me all the way from Germany saying, "Oh, I thought at last I'd get to see something, but I just saw your clothes drop to the floor." So I thought that was cute. That was very cute.
Well, scenes
Oh,
like
and
that leave more to
let me
the
tell.
they
I
leave
was just
more
going
to
to
the
say, when we did that film too,
yeah.
here we were in some sleazy part of town, and we were actually heckled by actual prostitutes who were like, "Oh, well, you're just acting, but we're the real deal."
Oh,
Yeah, so that was kind of funny.
well, I find the scenes where they don't show it but they imply it. I find that allows a filmmaker to be more creative with how he shoots it.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course.
I mean, the classic example was the shower scene in Psycho. You know,
Oh, do you know, up till today,
mhm.
I do not get into a shower until I've double checked that my doors are locked. That's how powerful you're laughing, but I'm serious.
Yeah.
Up till today, so many decades later, you will not see me in a shower without double checking that my doors are locked first.
Yeah.
That to me was the most amazing scene ever in a film, in terms of affecting one's life forever.
Well, it changed the way I view cinema too, because it was my first midnight film. Yep. So, but yeah, you don't see nearly as much as you think you do, and that was what made it so powerful.
Mhm.
And so I think, with nude scenes, I think they could take a cue from Hitchcock on that.
Mhm.
Yep.
Definitely.
Yep.
And not only that, your imagination could take you so many places where
Yep.
if you just see everything right there, that has its limits. But if you could imagine what could be there, it takes it to another level.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Wow. I've enjoyed talking about Beyond the Valley of the Dolls with you, and I want to send, of course, a special shout out to Dolly Reed Martin for hooking us up, and of course your husband, of course, Louis Small. How long have you been with him?
Over 20 years.
Oh wow! Between
Yeah.
you and Dolly, like I said, you don't hear a lot of marriages that last that long, and I think that's great.
Yeah, well, see, you know what else was beautiful?
Hmm.
Dolly and I had not been in touch with each other since 1970 when the movie ended. And then we reconnected a few years ago, and it was funny because it was like we picked up right where we left off, as if
Yeah.
there was no gap in between. And that made it even more special and more powerful. And there were so many things about her that I knew before she became Mrs. Martin that made it another level of connection with us. And it was so interesting because she just sold her home in Malibu, where she and Dick lived for the 40 years. and she had this beautiful collage wall when you walked into the house, and there our picture was up on that wall with all these other celebs that Dick had known over the years. And so that was very exciting to see that my picture was on her wall of celebrities with Dick Martin, all kinds of people. It was just unbelievable, including heads of state and everything else.
Oh,
And
wow.
every night, just as the sun was going down on the horizon, we would go out by the in the front of the house and say a little prayer to Dick. And so that was very, very moving for the two of us.
Yeah.
And the fact that we both knew him and we felt connected, and that his spirit was there protecting her and being there. So even these
Absolutely.
horrifying accidents that she's had sometimes, I feel, well, Dick saved her from having it worse than
Yeah.
it might have been,
Yes.
if something happened.
Absolutely.
Mhm. So that was
Wow.
a true love. But again, when she came here to this country, she said that her goal was to meet a rich American, get married. And it turns out she ended up meeting Dick Martin, and they ended up getting married, but then it became a true love affair. And as I said, it lasted for 40 years. Only his death separated them. And then it was interesting because she said so many men who were just friends of theirs while he was alive all came pouncing after her after he was gone. But it was like, she kept hands off.
Yeah.
Yep. And she
Well,
has a great sense of humor,
yeah.
Dolly. So she always keeps you laughing. Always
Yeah.
keeps you laughing.
Yeah. Well, I love those shots of her in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls where she's at the table and you just see her wide eyes, you know?
Yes, but that's another joke that you're mentioning, Dolly. When we did this autograph signing a few years ago, and I told you the guy who came with all this memorabilia that I couldn't even imagine how he
Hmm.
had these things. He came, so I was signing signing autographs for him, and other people came because they hadn't seen us in so many years. So it became to the point some people, because we were at a table and they were showing us stuff, some of the men actually ended up getting on their knees to show us something, so that people at the other tables were saying, what the hell is going on over there? That all of these men are over here, and some of them are on their knees in front of your table. So
Yeah.
we had such a hoot. We were laughing our heads off because it really looked funny if you look from a distance to see what was going on with all these guys in front of our table, and some of them are on their knees. It was hysterical. So we had a good laugh.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is coming very, very close to its 50th anniversary. Can you believe that?
No, I can't.
Yeah, wow. Well, it came out 2 years before I was born, so
Yeah, that's incredible.
yep. And I don't know where I discovered the movie, but I've got at home a nice Criterion Blu-ray release of the film, and it's amazing because you're my third interview from the film, and it's been wonderful to be able to do this and celebrate these cult films
Mhm.
and yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on here, and yes, I definitely am going to reach out to your sister Lorelei McBroom and hear about her
Uh,
stories as a musician and but
yeah, and her tour with Pink Floyd, and
yep.
being on the Steel Wheels tour with Mick Jagger, and she's
Mhm.
in their IMAX movie that they did of the Steel Wheels tour. And she got that gig because she's friends with Lisa Fisher, and Lisa Fisher couldn't do that tour at that time because she was doing something else, so she recommended my sister to cover for her.
Well,
So
there
that
you
was
go.
an added honor.
There you
And then that
go.
she did the European tour with Rod Stewart. That was really super.
Mhm.
And that she's still my little sister, so that's even funnier. Yeah.
Well, tell me, do you before we close off, do you have a web page, or I know you mentioned charities and stuff too, anything you want to plug before we close off?
Okay, well, my sister Lorelei has been the one really pushing me because I'm always the one down doing the grunge work, and she's trying to get me into the 21st century. So our email address is FOCS, that stands for Our Children's Sake, at hotmail.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then, so that's FOCS at hotmail.com. Then our website that Lorelei has put together for me is www.FOCSF, because that stands for Our Children's Sake Foundation.org.
Okay.
And then Lorelei also put together a website for me as an actress at www.Marcia, MARCIA, McBroom, MCBROOM.com.
So that's the email address for the organization or that web page, huh?
Right. So the organization is FOCSF,
Okay.
as in Frank.org. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, you know what? This has been a blast. I'm so glad I was able to have you on the phone, and I'm glad we were able to get connected, and glad to see you're still busy.
Yeah. I should plug my son's email address, though, too, though, his website. It's www.earthdriver.org,
Okay.
earthdriver.org, and his name is Jeremiah Hosea. He plays bass, and he's performed in many different countries with several different bands, including Gloria Gaynor and a blues singer named James Blood Ulmer, and all kinds of other groups, and it's been very exciting for him.
Oh, fantastic! You
Yeah.
guys got a lot of music in your family.
Yeah, it's really beautiful because to me, music is really the pulse of the earth. When you think about it, everything is in a rhythm,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel that music is the secret key to world peace. Because notice how music can be translated, even if you don't speak the language, the rhythm can get to you. And I'm telling you, when I saw my first Pink Floyd concert
Mm-hmm.
with my sisters on stage singing, my two sisters, because I have another one, Durga McBroom, who
Okay.
also toured with Pink Floyd and also worked with Billy Idol and other stars.
Okay.
When I saw the power of the music captivate an audience of like 50,000 people, it's like, there's no use for war anymore because if music can bring people together in such a powerful way, surely we could sit down together and work things out. And
Absolutely.
even my sisters, they even go to places like Guatemala and Chile and everything, singing Pink Floyd music. And I wouldn't even think they'd have that deep a following in Latin American countries because it's a British band. But yeah, the music surpasses language barriers, cultural barriers. Music transcends all of that. So that's something for everybody to think of. So I think that's why people try to trivialize the industry, because they don't want to accept or want people to understand the power. And even if you look at things like the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, when you think about it, there was music that went along with each of those different periods, with the Great Depression, with everything, like Brother, Do You Have a Dime during the Great Depression. So music can give so many serious messages, and that's why even our little band. Oh yeah, somebody told me, one of my fans told me that our band, Carrie Nations, which again was a spoof because Carrie Nation was a woman who was for prohibition, and here our group was all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So, so that's why the name of the band was the Carrie Nation. So see, if you didn't know that history, that would go over your head.
Yeah, I didn't know
Yeah,
it.
you see that? So this was part of the little spoof that they were pulling all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so here it is. The Carrie Nations are out there. Oh, so this is what my fan said, that the Carrie Nations was voted one of the top 10 bands, non-bands that became popular. So in other words, we weren't a real band, we were a fake band, but we are one of the most popular fake bands ever. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I met one of the members of the New York Dolls at one of these book signing conventions. Savin, he's French, and he said that they got their name of the New York Dolls from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, which I had no idea.
Well,
And
there you go.
he said there's a poster of us, our poster from the movie. He said he donated it to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because so many different artists would come to rehearse at their studio and they would all sign the poster. So they ended up donating it to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
There you
So
go.
again, another piece of trivia that I thought was fascinating.
It is fascinating. Well, you know what? It's been wonderful speaking to you. What an honor this has been. And I was just wondering before I let you go if I could get you to do a plug for my show.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. Just state your name and say that you're listening to Greg Gilbert, and my show is called Python's Paradise, and I'm out of New Brunswick, Canada. Can you get all that?
Okay, so it's Greg Gilbert.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's Python's Paradise
Yep.
out of New Brunswick, Canada.
Canada, yeah. You ever been up this way?
No, I've been to Montreal, Montreal,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't been to New Brunswick, but I love Canada.
There you go.
Yeah, I love Canada. As you know, during the enslavement time in our songs, when people sang about going to heaven, heaven was the password for Canada. The people were trying to escape.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they'd say, I'm going to heaven. Yeah.
Oh,
So we have very
fantastic.
close feelings towards Canada.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Hmm?
Well, you all set?
Yes.
Okay, go.
Hi, this is Marcia McBroom, one of the dolls from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, and I just had a fabulous interview with Greg Gilbert of Python Greg's Python from New Brunswick, Canada. And so love the show, listen to the iPods, and have a great life. I hope I said that right.
You said it perfectly. That was great.
So it's Greg's Python?
It's Python's Paradise, but that's
Oh,
fine.
Python's Paradise. I'm sorry. You want me to do it again?
You know what? Feel free. That's okay. Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Marcia McBroom, one of the dolls from Beyond the Valley of the Dolls, member of the Carrie Nations Girls Rock Trio, and I just had a fabulous interview with Greg Gilbert of Python's Paradise from New Brunswick, Canada. So carry on. May the world hear this broadcast, this podcast, and all the best in your lives. Thank you.
Absolutely. And of course, we love Dolly Reed Martin, and we wish her the best.
Right, and we always send our profound blessings to Cynthia Myers, our other doll from the
Yes.
Carrie Nations.
Absolutely, absolutely. Loved her in that film too.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you know what? This has been wonderful. I thank you so much for making my July.
I know we covered a lot of ground here. Well, see, that's what was fun about the interview. You had me thinking about things that I haven't thought about in decades.
Yeah.
And so, as you said, you were born 2 years after the movie was even made. So you can imagine how deep that is to start with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and I love exploring these films, and I love the midnight audience, so it's always fun to dig these films out that audiences interact with. So that's always a passion for me.
Yeah, it is a passion. And as I said, I love the music from the film. It was a lot of fun. Lip syncing, we had to lip sync everything, of course, but it was great. It was so empowering and exhilarating, and it was fun having the honor to work with Russ Myers. He was an absolute doll, wonderful man, beautiful man, and I was so excited because one day I just picked up my phone and a man on the other end said, "Is this Marcia McBroom?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Is it the Marcia McBroom?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I'm calling on behalf of Roger Ebert, and he'd like to invite you and a guest to come out to Illinois for his Overlooked Film Festival because he wants to present you with the Thumbs Up Award for your role in Beyond the Valley of the Dolls." And I was like, oh, my God. So
There
that's
you go.
what started my whole friendship with Roger.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, and he had another filmmaker, Werner Erhard,
Hmm.
Herzog, Werner Herzog, who's done a number of amazing movies. So we got to meet him on the last day of the festival. And I've seen films of Werner's since then. It's like, oh, my God, this man is so intense, with his things, The Cave and other documentaries that he has done. He's an amazing filmmaker. So those are the level of people that Roger was able to connect us with during his film festival. It was great.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Well, Marcia, God bless you. Thank you so much for allowing me the honor to interview you for my show.
Thank you, Greg.
Yes,
Likewise.
absolutely. I will.
Okay, hon.
Absolutely. You take care.
You take care. Good night.
Absolutely. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.